some examples to what can occur when a CANS assessment is not done appropriately. That way we all understand and better advocate for the use of the CANS assessment and who are the people that are involved in participating in a CANS and reviewing a CANS and making decisions. So here in the juvenile system, the court system, who's going to rely on a proper CANS, on a CANS assessment? Judges and attorneys, child's counsel, that's child's attorney, the service providers, government and researchers, and most importantly, youth and their caregivers. That's a given. Most importantly, it's the youth and caregivers that are going to rely on that CANS assessment so that they can better see what are their strengths and needs. And government and researchers, where they're using the CANS assessment results and they're relying that a CANS assessment is being done appropriately so that we can provide proper data so that the government and the researchers can continue utilizing that data for the reasons that it's intended for example, for funding, for seeing what other systems can be implemented, what things need to be changed, how is the CANS assessment helping others. All sorts of research is being researchers are relying on that proper data so that we can really better utilize the CANS assessment with the youth and their families. Service providers do rely on the CANS assessment when they're involved with children and their families in the juvenile court system due to that child welfare involvement. The service providers are relying on this CANS assessment because it allows the service providers to see what are the strengths and needs of that youth and family to better obtain a picture of that youth and family on their needs and strengths. Like, how is it that the service provider can involve themselves with the youth and the family based off those needs and strengths that everyone's going to work on to better help that youth and family get out of the child welfare involvement and the juvenile involvement. Child's counsel also would rely on that CANS assessment because it would allow them to see what are the needs and strengths of the children that child's counsel is representing so that they can better understand, okay, and advocate for that child within the court system and outside of the court system and better collaborate better with the caseworkers and social workers involved so that that child and their family are getting their needs met and really get a better understanding of what's occurring behaviorally and that way they can advocate for that child and family within that court system. And judges and attorneys involved, judges would also have a better understanding of what is occurring with that child and family, and so that they can make, because at the end of the day, it's the judges that make that ultimate decision. And so it allows them to better understand the information that's being presented to them overall, what brought the family into the system, and, overall, the case plan. Most importantly, is the case plan appropriate? Is the case plan, it allows judges and counsel and child's counsel and attorneys to better understand from a behavioral standpoint. It's also a way to better help judges and counsel become more educated on and informed on how is it that service providers in the case plans are being conducted with the youth and the family. And it just helps streamline so much of the process. So if the CANS is inaccurate, the system is ineffective because child welfare agency, caseworkers, supervisors rely on them. It leads into, if a CANS is inaccurate, it's going to lead to insufficient funding. For numerous reasons. Well, I'll in the next slides, I'll go into detail for that. Insufficient funding, excessive documentation, and challenges with workforce development. Providers such as therapists, schools, community supports rely on an accurate CANS assessment. Families, youth, and caregivers relying on accurate services, and overall the juvenile court system, the judges, attorneys, and counsel. So it's important that a CANS assessment is as accurate as possible, and so that we can have an effective system overall. Reinforcing consistency and informed consent. When all parties align, services become more effective. And so it's all about proper data. CANS assessment is as we all know, is a collaborative tool. It's very important that we conduct this CANS assessment appropriately by assuring that we are including the voice of the youth and their families, because we're going to get that proper information first from the youth and their families. If we're not including the youth and their families appropriately when conducting this CANS assessment, then we're essentially sort of inferring behavior or possibly even allowing our own human biases to be inputted into this assessment. And as we all know, we're not to diagnose and infer when conducting this assessment. So getting really those, working collaboratively with the youth and their families to create that tailored case plan to that youth, and being able to see what else is going to go into these CANS assessments. It all depends on the needs of that youth and family and their particular situation, but some things might be school records or medical records, any sort of therapy that they've been in, to really better understand the family. But most importantly is really getting their input and involvement within this CANS assessment when conducting it. Conducting this proper CANS administration, CANS assessment allows for case plans to be tailored to that youth. Many times we will see that it's not just a one size fits all. One therapy might not be the best therapy for another child or for the same sibling within the same family. It really is on what are the strengths and needs of that youth, so that we could see what are the services that we're gonna that are gonna be best suited for that youth. And most importantly, why is it that it's important that we conduct a proper CANS assessment? Is that one very important thing is that we're getting informed consent by by bringing in the youth and family into the CANS assessment, sharing the results with them, letting them know these are your needs and your strengths, and really working collaboratively with them, because you're getting that informed consent for them to be able to consent to the services, to better understand why is it that the youth and the family, have them understand why is it that maybe a service might be the best. Having them be involved in creating that case plan, which I'll show why if we're not sharing it with the youth and the family, and we're not working collaboratively with them, it's going to lead to consequences with the family and the youth. It also sharing the CANS assessment and showing the family and the youth their strengths. It allows for transparency. It strengthens trust with the youth and their caregivers. Sharing the CANS assessment and working collaboratively helps allow to see that the case plan is as tailored as possible to the youth and their family. It allows for an exchange of conversation when conducting the CANS assessment and sharing it with the caregivers and the youth. So I will ask after I state this, but in the juvenile court system, why this is all important, that we do a proper CANS assessment, aside from the research and sharing it with the judges and counsel and everyone else involved, why it's so important to share it with the youth and the caregivers, is that in the child welfare system, we often see a lot of lack, just going into the child welfare system. You'll see a lot of individuals who lack self-worth, or have a believe that they lack any strengths as either a caregiver or the youth themselves. And I don't, and as we all know, if you lack that self-worth, or you lack the feeling or knowledge that you believe that you do not have any strengths as a caregiver or as a youth, it's not going to create hope. And when we do a proper CANS assessment and we work collaboratively with the youth and the caregivers, it creates hope. By showing them, these are your strengths. You have strengths to offer. For example, I was a service provider, and oftentimes a lot of individuals that do come through that child welfare system as a caregiver do believe that maybe they, a lot of guilt, and feel that they haven't contributed positively to their children, or don't have any strengths to offer because of that child welfare involvement. And when you are able to show them their strengths, for example, by showing, well, to the caregiver, look at how much knowledge you know, for example, on your child's school curriculum, or their medical needs, or their overall needs, or when the child's doing well in school. If the child's doing well at school, it's thanks to the caregiver. It allows the caregiver to see, oh, well, I also have a strength because I was caring for my child. I am a useful parent. I do have a strength, or I'm knowledgeable in my children's medical needs or school needs, or whatever needs that the overall well-being. Being able to highlight those small strengths, even if it's one, it helps build that acknowledgement that I have to offer something as a parent in a positive way. And and not just shaming, allowing a parent or a youth to feel that shame because they're going through that system, that this is a system to better help the youth and their family strengthen those strengths and get their needs met. It's not a system that's punitive. It's not a system that's meant to punish the parents or their youth because they're involved. It allows them to, the Kansas assessment allows these youth and caregivers for their strengths to also be highlighted, and to see that how is it that we're going to create these um, services or child welfare involvement in better assisting the children and their families, so that they can feel empowered and start healing. Now, for everyone here, have you guys, how many of you guys have seen, just you guys can raise your hands, have seen that a lot of parents and youth do come into the system feeling like they lack that self-worth? Melody?
Oh, yes, I was raising my hand.
Yeah. Oh, would you like to share?
Oh, I just think that that's a huge problem in our systems, and I appreciate you pointing that out about kind of like Bethany was talking about earlier about really focusing on all the issues in the person rather than who they are.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And anyone else that would like to share, please do. Um, that way we could all see what are the different things that we do see in this system. Okay, so okay, consequences of improper cans for youth and their families. So when we do not conduct a proper cans assessment, it's going to lead to that misaligned services. If we're not getting the data that's needed from the caregivers and the youth, and really working collaboratively and sharing, you're going to get those misaligned services because either behavior was inferred, or our own biases were put in. But it's so important to get those conducting that proper CANS assessment, because you're really getting an ideal picture of really what's the needs and strengths of that youth and their family to be able to create a and align those services. Because if we are not aligning those proper services to the youth and the parents, it's only going to lead to more trauma. And why is that? Well, if we're not aligning the proper services, or we're possibly not collaborating appropriately with the youth and the family, then they're going to be resistant to wanting to participate in services, or we might be involving the wrong services that are not actually going to help the youth and their family. It's going to lead to longer system involvement, And the longer the system involvement, the longer the child welfare is involved with the youth in the family, it's going to lead to the youth forming and their identity is going to be shaped by the system instead of being shaped by their creating their own resiliency and hope. And then the child begins to believe something is wrong with me. And I'm sure if you guys can raise your hands, how many times do we see that a youth starts to identify and their identity is being shaped by system involvement? Yes, kid. Rick's hands. It's yeah, thank you. It's inevitable. And lack of case planning integrity. If we're not obtaining a proper picture of that youth and their family, and the case plan is misaligned, there's lack of informed consent, which is very important. To obtain that informed consent, it's needed at the federal level. You even see it when we go to the doctor's office that we need that informed consent to be able to even accept services or go to services. And it compromises that family engagement. Like I've said, it's very important that we have family and youth engaged in those services. So oftentimes I've seen where a youth comes in or a family comes in and they have absolutely no idea why they're there, why they're even obtaining services. And if they have no idea why they're involved, then it makes it harder for the provider to understand how can we help this child, this youth, or their family lower risk? How is it that we can better tailor our, for example, a therapist? How can we better tailor a therapeutic plan to help this youth and family get out of the system, lower that risk, lower child welfare involvement? Oftentimes the youth and family that come into the services and they still have no idea what are their strengths and what are their core needs. If they were unable to identify their strengths and needs coming into the system and we're not conducting this CANS assessment appropriately, then that youth and family are still going to continue being able to understand or even see that they have any strengths. But if they come into the services after a CANS assessment was conducted appropriately and shared with them, and it was done collaboratively with the youth and family, and they understand then they understand why is it that I'm going to go and get that service. Why is it, as a parent, a caregiver, why is it that I'm going to go and get parenting classes, for example? And what is it that I'm going to work on? And when I go into this parenting classes, they're going to better understand, okay, whatever is being conducted in that parenting class, for example, that caregiver is going to be more engaged in that service in the parenting class. They're going to be more engaged in wanting to ask the proper questions, the right questions that are going to be tailored for them when they're attending that parenting class. They're going to be able to tailor and get those tools that are being taught in that parenting class and take it home and apply it within themselves and their children. Going to any mental health sessions, youth and families and their caregivers are going to be able to understand, why am I here? What are the strengths that we're going to build on? What are my needs? How are we going to work on that? And it would allow them to better ask questions to their therapist. How is it that I can work on this? How is it that I can apply my strengths in other areas of my life? I like to work on that. Or why is it that the caregiver in youth lacked the ability to identify their own strengths and values to begin with and work on that? So many things, like every youth and caregiver is a different case, so their needs are always going to be different. But overall, one thing is that if we better help the youth and family understand those needs and strengths, then they go into the services or work in their whatever extracurricular activities, whatever it may be. They go in better knowing that, hey, this is my strength, and this is how I'm going to use my strengths to continue building on. So when they get out of the child welfare system, they're going to use their strengths as a way to cope, a better way to work independently within themselves, a way to overcome obstacles by using their own strengths. And when this Kansas assessment is not being conducted within with the families and their youth, and especially in this court system, we're not being shared with the counsel and the judge, we can end up delaying reunification, risk of termination of parental rights, family separation because needs were unmet. And as I stated, parents appear non-compliant when services are not tailored. When we share this Kansas assessment and the services in the case plan, especially the Kansas assessment, when this Kansas assessment is being shared within the court system, it allows for that judge and the counsel to better understand the family and the children. It allows child's counsel to advocate for the youth. For example, there was an example that someone had made that there was a child's counsel within the juvenile court system, that there was a child that had gone into the juvenile court system because of crimes that they were committing. And this child was being looked at more for the crimes that the child was committing rather than the behavior that needed assistance or better assisting the child. It was more leaning towards punishment rather than helping the child. And so when this Kansas assessment was shared within the court system and the child's counsel was able to show what was occurring with that child or that youth. This is what was occurring. This is what's happening with the child. We shouldn't be looking at the crime of the child. So it allowed the child's counsel to present this child in a more from a behavioral standpoint. All we need is to help the child in this way. These are the child's strengths, and this is how we're going to help the child get out of the juvenile court system. And it assisted the child from being placed into the juvenile court system for their crimes, and instead the judge was able to allow that youth to work on that behavior. It's very effective. It helps also families better advocate for themselves in the court system and be able to communicate their own needs or their own needs in that court system, and better explain what are the advancements that they have made since in child welfare involvement. And you can, you can see that data in the CANS assessment. When you do the CANS assessment again, you do a follow-up and you see how is it that the youth and families' behavior has progressed. You can see more of a clearer data. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. And if you do, just please feel free to ask.
Yeah, so people can use the chat for questions. There are not any questions in the chat at the moment, but I'll let you know if some pop in.
Thank you. So system level consequences, entire juvenile system making decisions on inaccurate data, prolonged dependency cases, like I stated. Bad data is going to only result in invalid research, poor policy implementation and training, funding misuse, fraud risk, depending on jurisdiction. So when I had stated earlier, workforce training, if conducting a CANS assessment appropriately would allow for anyone using a CANS assessment to obtain valid data so that they can implement proper policies and trainings. If a CANS assessment is not being done appropriately, then it's only going to lead to bad data, bad policy, poor trainings, and doing a proper CANS assessment creates efficiency. It creates efficiency in the workforce because CANS assessment is very straightforward. It's very straightforward. You get your certification, and the CANS assessment itself speaks for a majority of that youth and their family. So when we're going into the court system, the CANS assessment's already communicating a lot of data to the counsel and judges. And one thing that's great about judges and attorneys is that they're already trained in reading and reviewing reports, cases. So for them to be able to get this CANS assessment would allow them to better understand the case that's on hand and what are the advancements that have occurred within that youth and their family and the behavior that they have worked on and the strengths they have worked on so that we don't create prolonged dependency cases, prolonged cases. That's not efficient. And if for the jurisdictions, if we're not conducting a proper CANS assessment, then we're not accurately getting a picture of that youth and their family, which is only leading to the misuse of funds if we're not aligning cases, services appropriately. And cases are just being prolonged if we're not really, if without a proper CANS, we're really not helping that youth stay out of the system. And it's just going to continue leading to results that are stagnant because the CANS assessment is not being done appropriately. And stagnant results are in these situations because it's the CANS assessment, it works. And so if we're not getting these proper results, the proper data from the youth and the family, then we're not going to be able to continue creating the proper training and policies and services within our community and the agencies that are using it to help the youth and families.
So there was a question in the chat, Lynnette.
Yes.
Also, one was, do you have any specific guidelines for how to engage partners in collaborative assessments. This is one of the hardest things to encourage. And then the second question was, several states are moving to more assertive fidelity processes and metrics. And do you have any thoughts or recommendations around that?
Okay. The first one, when you partners, is the person referring to service providers?
Oh, I
Or,
think it's anybody. It could be the family, the youth, and then just in your language, you were describing the importance of engaging people in the collaborative assessment process, and so that's always a challenge sometimes. And I think they were looking for your thoughts on guidelines around that.
Thank you. Okay, so for example, let's start first with the service providers, and then I'll move on to the youth and their families. So the service providers, for them, just sharing the CANS assessment. If they're working with child welfare, show them that TCOM offers trainings. They're offered weekly. Try to get them engaged in that to better understand the CANS assessment and how it's implemented and how it's used with the youth and their families. It's all about educating those service providers and anyone involved with the children, educating them on how is it that the CANS is used and how is it that they can implement the CANS assessment into their own therapy. When someone's coming in, if a person's coming into a therapy session, that youth or caregiver is already under knowing why they're going to that service. So they're already knowing, I'm going to work on these needs and strengths. And so it's already known why they're going to go in there. So it would be to the benefit of the provider to assure that they're reviewing the CANS, because that way that there is still that informed consent. This is what I'm consenting to as a youth and caregiver going into the therapy session. I'm going to be working on these strengths and my needs. And how is it that I can do that within the scope of my ability and my own situation? So if you're going in there into the therapeutic session, it's very much needed for that provider to understand why is it that why they're in there and what is it that they're going to be working on, which is sharing that CANS assessment, because it's very straightforward. So it's very much needed for that provider if they're going to be seeing the children and the youth and the caregivers in the child welfare system, so that they can create an ethical surround the therapy that they're going to be applying, so it's ethically implemented, working on the things that those youth and caregivers agreed on. And when it comes to engaging the youth and their families, well, for many jurisdictions, a lot of times you're coming to see the children, the youth, and their caregivers. You're seeing them in meetings. For some jurisdictions, it's called child family team meetings. You're already engaging with these families and their youth. You're already reviewing a lot of reports, school reports, medical reports. You're able to obtain a lot of that data, but most importantly, getting them engaged, and the youth and the family, is really first having that conversation with them. What is this CANS assessment? And letting them know, I like to see your strengths. Get it, and getting them engaged in those proper questions, and showing them why you're asking those questions. Be effective in the way that you ask questions to the youth and family during these meetings, or the times that you do see them, so that you can obtain the proper data for that CANS assessment while letting them know why is it that you're conducting this CANS assessment. It's all about collaborating with the youth and their families and letting them know, this is why we're here. We want to help you, for example. I know you have some strengths. I want to see that. Everyone's different. Really having a tailored plan to them, and really start showing them their strengths and getting them involved and letting them know that they are worth more than than this. And the children can work on their strengths, really engaging that. I don't know if I hopefully I answered your question for the person that answered that. Asked that question. But if not, please.
Thank you. Yeah.
And then the assessment question.
Sure. The other one was about just moving towards more sort of fidelity processes and metrics to measure fidelity and the use of the tools, similar to the way you're describing it. And just if you have recommendations on that.
Okay. So for that, it all depends on the jurisdiction that you're in. And for that reason, it's very important that everyone utilize the TCOM trainings. TCOM trainings are conducted on a weekly basis. And it's all about getting your program involved. So the company that you're in, the entity that you're in, getting everyone involved in consistency and proper use of the CANS assessment. And the way we do that is because every jurisdiction is different. Every welfare system tends to be a different depending on where you're located. But most importantly is that if we attend these TCOM trainings that are available to everyone, is everyone that's involved in CANS, it would allow for everyone to be able to better ask questions from other individuals from other jurisdictions, and most importantly, ask the CANS trainers questions themselves. This is the situation that I have, or this is how we're implementing things. How can I make things better? What is it that I need to do? And really becoming more educated in how the CANS assessment not only affects the children and overall everyone involved, would better help us to advocate for the proper use of CANS assessment within our own company. But I always I've said it, it's very important to attend those TCOM trainings, because this is where you're going to continue developing yourself and the company in the proper use of the CANS assessment. It's all about just following what was learned in training when we trained for the CANS assessment, and just continue to do that. And how is it that we can do that within the systems that we have and the services we have available within our own community. I don't know. I'm hoping I answered that question for.
Yeah, sure. The person responded that is Dr. Lyons has said they agree. You made a really good point. When systems only train assessors, it's like learning Latin when everyone else speaks other languages. So I think you did.
Thank you. So it's one thing is, why is this so important to do a proper CANS? Because these children, these youth, rely on it. They rely on being able to better understand themselves. They rely on us, if we're going to be involved, to allow the youth and their families to really understand that they are worth more. They have those strengths. Really get them engaged and try to get them engaged and do a proper CANS assessment, so that when this CANS assessment is presented within the juvenile court system, the judges themselves and all the council can better help understand the situation of why the youth and their families are in there. It helps the main decision maker, the judge, understand, okay, now many of the areas have been simplified, and this is what's going on. This is the progress that for example, the youth and families have made within that court system, and it allows them to make a better decision. It allows parents and youth to see things are transparent within the system. Child welfare involvement is here to help us create hope. It allows the youth and family to get away from being timid and possibly even scared or of being coming to ask help from the child welfare system when they're in it, to wanting to be engaged and advocate for themselves for services and be more resilient in themselves. And it's all about educating the attorneys and the counsel and the judges on the CANS assessment, continuing just to highlight things within the CANS assessment, the actual assessment itself, and so that we can little by little get them to better understand that CANS assessment. But best is for them to see it and see what is really occurring with this youth and family. Creating clear justification summaries for the CANS assessment that would also be assist the families and the people involved in the court system, such as the judges and counsel, to understand why is it that certain things are being rated the way they are. Because one issue might be different will be different for another youth. Two youths are just going to have different needs and different reasons why they're scoring something. So having that justification summary really helps the youth, family, everyone involved understand what is really occurring. So really writing clear summaries, because we have to understand this information is going to be shared, and that way it creates consistency. And if a new caseworker comes in, it makes it a lot easier for that caseworker to get involved in that case, that youth and family, by looking at the CANS assessment and reviewing that summary, which would create, again, efficiency and better training of staff. And the more we do a better CANS assessment, it's going to lead to fewer cases. It's going to lead to shorter timeframes. Because we're really getting to the bottom of what is occurring with these children and families, and their involvement within the child welfare system. It just overall creates that efficiency, and it lessens trauma. It goes from creating trauma to helping the child and really creating those appropriate case plans, and also creates the proper use of funding. So here, every stakeholder in the juvenile system relies on accuracy. We cannot afford shortcuts because they are children involved, youth involved. We have to mirror that behavior that we're going to be transparent. We're going to do things appropriately. We're here to help. And when you mirror that, it allows them to be able to get that feeling of safety, and the caregivers and the youth be able to get on board with getting that help that's needed. Proper CANS is going to lead to hope, healing, and stronger families. And improper CANS, it's just going to only lead to trauma, delays, and systemic harm. Here it's Dr. Lyons had stated, helping people to change their lives in some important way. That is all we need. We just need to help youth and families change a small portion, something. One change is only going to create a domino effect. It's going to allow them to create that resiliency, because they're going to start believing in themselves. Oh, I have a strength. I have something to offer. I worked on this aspect of my life using my strength, and it's going to lead to that individual strengthening that strength, and it's inevitable for them to start creating other strengths and rely on their strengths for when obstacles, because obstacles are part of life. When obstacles come, they're going to learn how to better cope with those obstacles in a healthy manner by using their strengths. And they're going to start, they're going to believe in themselves when in their own thoughts, and they're not going to doubt themselves when an obstacle comes their way. They're going to know, I know that I can effectively assess this situation, and I know, because based off of my experiences and things I've learned about myself and my strengths, I'm going to be able to better identify those needs and how to overcome that obstacle and not stay in maladaptive or destructive behaviors. But I had one more thing that I wanted to say. When in regard to keeping providers engaged or understanding the CANS assessment, it's very important, or even counsel, it's very important for them to understand their client and the caregivers, because it creates competency. They have to be competent in the youth and caregivers that they're either treating or representing. Without that competency, then they're lacking the ability to competently represent the caregivers and the youth, competently advocate for that youth and their caregivers, and being able to be competent in being able to provide those services, because they have to know the clients that are coming in or representing in order to be able to tailor a proper plan for whoever is involved. So competency is one very important thing, is informed consent and having them be competent. So they have to be competent. And it's the ethical thing to help this youth and their families.